So I wanted to start by thanking everyone for letting me back, and especially Margaret. I recognize quite a few faces from last time, but if you don't remember, I was here about a year ago talking about Walmart. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Today we're talking about internet Walmart or Amazon. So I just want to preface something also. I'm not an expert on Amazon. I suspect there's probably folks in this room that probably know more about Amazon than me. But one thing I think that was rightly said is that hopefully I can add more of a human face to sort of the underside of Amazon. We mostly think about, wow, that came so quick, and that's exactly what I wanted. But how does that book, or how does, I guess you can buy like lettuce on Amazon now, so how did that lettuce get to my house so quickly? Well, there's workers behind it. It's not the drones that we've seen in the news lately that, oh, Amazon's going to have drones, but there's really a complex network of workers behind this, and it can be a daunting employment scenario for a lot of them. So I wanted to show a little bit of a video that was produced recently by a program called Vice. I guess it's on HBO. I don't have HBO. So they came through and did a documentary on temp workers, and this was actually related to our work with the Change to Win Coalition, which there's 3 worker centers involved in that, one out in Los Angeles, one out in Chicago, and ourselves here in New Jersey. And that was primarily formed to go after Walmart, basically, to hold them accountable for their supply chain. It's broadened a lot more than that. New Labor's work has always been broader than that, but that was a campaign we were involved in. Perhaps I'll step back for a second and just mention what New Labor is, because I think that's important. Has everyone heard of New Labor? No? Great, awesome. New Labor is a worker center. I don't know if anyone's heard of a worker center before. Well, you can call it something along the lines of an alternative community-based union, where you think of your traditional unions, they take place in the workplace, right? A worker center, think about taking it outside of the workplace, but still around work-related issues. And that's sort of how we operate. And most worker centers that you'll see in this country, there's a great book by Janice Vine called Worker Center, if you're ever interested in learning more about it. Mostly deal with low-wage immigrant communities and deal with issues they face on the job, but also broader issues in the community. So we'll do things, anything from tenants' rights issues too. But we basically try to figure out how to improve the labor situation for low-wage immigrant workers. We have a center in New Brunswick, one in Newark, and one in Lakewood. So that's the basics behind New Labor. And primarily it's a Latino organization because many of the immigrant workers here in the state are Latino. So I want to start by showing a little bit of video about temp work. And the reason, well, this is a presentation about Amazon, so why am I talking about temp work? Well, a real lot of the labor that's done for Amazon is done through temp labor. Now, you might think back to the old Kelly Girls model of like, oh, just get, a couple extra secretaries or something. This is something that's emerging more and more, what we might call part of the precarization of the economy, meaning that work is more and more not, you're a direct hire, you work here for 20 years and you retire with a pension. No, this is, you don't even work for the employers that you're working at their location. Sorry, come out as crazy as I like, but basically, the people that you're working for aren't even your employers. You're working for a temp agency, and you're not a direct hire, and you don't have the rights of a regular employee, and supposedly you're just there temporarily, but many times you'll see people there for years and years. So this was a documentary about temp agencies, and again, why is it important to Amazon? Well, I don't know if anyone heard the news. This was about 3 months back now in December. There's a new Avenel Amazon facility, and that's actually the first Amazon facility in the state that I know of. There's a lot of facilities that do a little bit of Amazon here and there. Much of the supply chain here in New Jersey is like that. But this is 100% Amazon, and they're actually building right now another larger facility based around grocery delivery in Robbinsville that's should be completed in the next couple of months if it's not completed already. I think they've already started looking to fill spots already. Well, so in this Avenel facility that's only been open for a couple of months, in December, a man named Ronald Smith was crushed to death at work. There's still not full clarity as to what happened in the instance. OSHA's investigating it at the moment, but this, I'd like to say this was a freak accident, but this is by no means a freak accident. I have workers coming into New Labor on a weekly basis who are in some way or another injured on the job at warehouses, and one of the most common things we do see is people getting crushed by boxes falling down from above them. So that may have been what happened in this case. I'm not completely sure, but unfortunately it happens all too often. And we actually have an event coming up that I'll mention at the end about health and safety on the job, but it's a big issue. So, why should we be concerned about this? Well, I mean, here is Amazon. It just showed up in New Jersey, and already there's one death. How many more are we going to have? How many injuries? How many workers are going to suffer from the kinds of employments we see at Amazon? Hopefully, I'm trying to show little bits of this video because it's long. It's about 30 minutes, so we're going to attempt to play a little bit and see if we can. If not, we'll just skip past it. So if you can just give me one moment to set it up, all right? It's a great video. It's available on YouTube. If you just type in Vice temporary workers, that should pop up. So it's about 30 minutes long, but you didn't come here to watch the video, right? So this is, I'm sorry, always listening to that guy speak drives me nuts because he refers to, he says, well, they're not a commodity, they're a human resource. I really don't understand what the difference is. He basically said the same thing both ways. And the idea that he's creating opportunities for people by 1 in 40, 1 in 50 people, getting a job, direct hire. I mean, that's the one thing I want to start with almost, is that it's not like these temporary workers are seasonal workers that, all right, it's November, it's Christmas season, we need to get these gifts out. This is how these facilities operate. The majority of the facilities that I deal with, and I deal with a lot of facilities, are I'd say the majority are 100% temporary workers as far as the people working on production lines. There's obviously the administrative staff that takes care of everything, but the majority of the people working there are temporary workers. And someone asked me about a good employer, Costco's, who's a good union employer. They pay their workers well, but even in their facilities here in New Jersey, they use temporary agencies to fill their work. And the guy in Chicago that was talking before said he was making $12 an hour. That would be outstanding here in New Jersey. That's not the case. The overwhelming majority of temporary agency jobs here in Jersey are $8.25 an hour. And we have to think about that. It's $8.25 an hour, but then come the deductions, because it's not just $8.25 an hour, because as Margarita, who's one of our leaders of New Labor, she's a really awesome person, and a long-term member of New Labor. She was saying she has to take the van to work. Well, they charge them for that van. They charge them about an hour's worth of work each day to take that van. So that's every day minus $8.25 off of what they make. And then usually they have when they get their payment, they have to go to the check cashing establishment, which is often owned by the temporary agency, and they get a fee deducted from that too. So when it comes down to everything, they're making significantly below the minimum wage. And it's, the minimum wage as it is, we all know, is not a living wage. So you can imagine how difficult it is for someone like Margarita to, not only to provide for herself, her 2 kids, and her family back in Honduras, then to have all these deductions on top. And she works in a facility where everyone is a temporary worker. If anyone's wearing Levi jeans in here right now, it probably went through Margarita's facility. So it's a big issue that we're dealing with here. And why does Amazon matter in this, right? Amazon matters in this because alongside Walmart, they've developed the industry, the logistics industry, into what it is today. You used to have warehouses, and you've had warehouses here in New Jersey for a long time coming over the border, Newark. But what we're seeing more and more is this constant push down to reduce costs. And how they do that through the temporization of their employees. And this is a famous poster over at New Labor that we use a lot in our educational classes. This is the classic image that we have in warehouses, and unfortunately, I mean it when I say I have at least one worker come in with a significant injury a week. You have the warehouse employer, and then you have the temp agency, and it's often even more complex than that, especially here in New Jersey. So say you'll have Walmart or Amazon, they operate through other third-party logistics firms. So there's the retailer, but then there's the warehouse owner. There might also be, on top of that, a different company than the warehouse owner that's the managing firm. Then you have the temporary agency, who's technically supposed to be the employer, but they're not around at the facilities, and then you have these workers in between. What happens is, because of this triangulation that you heard mentioned in the video, no one wants to be responsible, and that's the idea of it. So it's not temporary workers because they need extra work for this season before Christmas or anything like that. They're temporary workers to deny workers' rights, plain and simple. That's the point of it. There's no other purpose for it. They could easily pay the workers a little bit more for the money that's being siphoned from their salaries to the temporary agencies. But the reason they don't do that, the reason why they don't pay the workers directly, is because it allows them to exploit the workers. You know, we traditionally think of warehouse workers were often union workers back in the day. Well, does anyone have any idea why temporary agency workers would be hard to unionize, why they are easy to deny workers' rights? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
There's a large population that's not even legal that's going through the temp agencies.
Right, that's exactly right, and that's one of the biggest things we see in New Jersey is that a lot of the workers have insecure immigration status in this country, we'll say, and it's a way for them to hide that fact. They can say, oh, we didn't know they're just a temporary worker, so they don't have to keep the level of records that you would expect of a direct employer. So that's one reason. And on top of that, there was an unfortunate ruling through the National Labor Relations Board that if a worker gets fired, say for unionization, well, if the labor board finds that they were illegally fired, that person can go back to work. Now, if they're an undocumented worker, you can't get them back to work because the government can't go and say, you have to rehire this person that was illegally working here. So it's a way for them to continuously union bust. On top of that, there's another important thing about temporary agencies that make it difficult to unionize them. The fact of the matter is, where's their work site, right? Or who is their employer? Well, their employer is technically the temporary agency. So if you were to unionize them, you'd have to unionize all the employees of that temporary agency. Well, there's one problem. They work in various different sites, and although someone might work for 5-6 years in one site, there's also a constant influx and outflux of people working. So it's very difficult to unionize those workers. It's theoretically possible, but really it's pretty much impossible to do. And then, so beyond just the simple ability to defend workers' rights, there's also the question of who's responsible for them. These workers work in warehouses through OSHA are supposed to have basic health and safety training. Well, who's supposed to train them? Is it the temporary agency? Is it the employer? Both point to the other and say, no, it's not me, it's them. So if you have an accident on the job, you have this classic thing. And I remember when I first started working at New Labor, I thought this was like an interesting sign, but I can't tell you how many times I've actually had to deal with this exact situation where they both point fingers at each other. It was about a week or two ago, I had a worker come in. She was suffering from harassment, unfortunately, from several of her coworkers. She's a transgender individual, and she had a bunch of workers that were sort of harassing her and touching her and saying, if you're a real man, you wouldn't be bothered by this. And she's like, well, I'm not a real man. I don't claim to be a real man. And they kept touching her and bothering her. Real straight out harassment. She went to her supervisor several times and said, this needs to stop. They're really harassing me. I come here to work. I've been working here for 2 years. I've never given anyone a hard time. I've always done my work well. I have good evaluations. please do something about this. Don't you have some sort of human resources here? And he said, well, no, we don't have anything like that here for you. We don't have anything here like that for you. Why? Because he was the supervisor from the company. Her human resources is the agency. So there's no human resources in the facility for her. So she continued to complain to him. She called the temporary agency. They wouldn't return her phone calls. She kept complaining, and then finally, after weeks and weeks of enduring this terrible harassment unfortunately from her fellow coworkers, one of them tried to touch her, and she swatted their hand away. And in swatting their hand away, she accidentally sort of slipped past their lip and sort of knocked them right here. Well, what did he do? He knew a little bit. He knew the temper agency, dispatcher better than her. So he was able to get in touch with him, and complain. And what happened to her the next day? She was fired. So after repeatedly doing exactly what one would expect that you're supposed to do, she was let go. And so I went with her. Well, first we called the temporary agency and said, we explained the whole situation out to him. And, he said, well, she hit him, that's what I heard, that's the story I went on, so I had to make that decision. And I said, well, you had this whole story going on, and she reported it to the company. And he's like, well, I had no idea about that, so that's something you should talk to the company about. And I said, okay, that's fine. We'll go and talk to the company. So we drove over to the Raritan distribution center. It's a bunch of distribution centers in Raritan. And we went and tried to talk to management. Well, management went and hid. They saw us coming, they hid, and they called the temporary agency. And although the temporary agency said, oh yeah, you can go and talk to them, as soon as I got there, I got a phone call screaming at me saying, what are you doing there? You're gonna ruin our business, you can't be there, you need to go away. This has nothing to do with the company. It's like, well, wait, you just told me that it had nothing to do with you and that I should talk to the company. So I said, I just followed what you told me to do. So I went and talked to the company, but now they're saying, no, you can't talk to the company, I'll resolve this. Well, it's still going back and forth. It's been about 2 or 3 weeks now that we've been going back and forth. At this point, they're not returning our phone calls. And yeah, there was a clear discrimination case, and she followed all the procedures. But to be honest with you, we will have no luck pursuing any sort of discrimination case there. That's just it. She has to look for a new job. So, that's just a recent story. I have a ton of stories like that, and that is absolutely the classic scenario that we have here. These workers basically work in these factories with no rights whatsoever. Not no rights, because there's some things we can go after. So if they're not paying their workers what they owe them, we file wage claims and stuff like that. They do have these rights, but pegging someone as responsible is very difficult. And what we found when we've actually gone after these temporary agencies and really got a huge OSHA claim against them, they'll disappear. So we had one recently. This was about maybe 9 months ago, something like that. We found numerous violations, wage theft cases, and unfortunately health and safety violations for these temporary agency workers. And they were working for Atlantis Personal Staffing. Well, we had about almost 100 between the wage theft case and the health and safety violations, we had about 200,000 in fines against them. So what happened? Atlanta's Personal Staffing disappeared. It's gone for a couple weeks. A couple weeks go by, new agency pops up. What's it called? Olympus Personal Staffing. They still got all the Atlantis Personal Staffing signs up, and despite the fact that you have all the same staffers working there, they assured me that it's not the same owner, that the other business they think went bankrupt, and that they won't be able to pay for those fines. So this is classic. So going after these agencies, even when you can really get them, they disappear and they pop up as something slightly different. Someone sells the business to his cousin, and that's it. So basically what we're looking at is a very sophisticated model in denying workers their rights. And I'd love to see the traditional union campaign going after this, but honestly, the way things are, it's very difficult. But I don't want to say that these workers are hopeless. I've seen a lot of documentaries, a lot of folks come to talk to New Labor. These workers are standing up for their rights. I like to point this out. I know it's a little bit of a diversion from the Amazon thing, but folks like Margarita, and there's another one of our members, Raphael, in the video. People are standing up, and we've had a lot of successes against these agencies, and there are ways to stand up and fight back against them. And I guess that's one of the things I wanted to open up to discussion about, but also mention a couple points. One of the most important things, I think, is community involvement. And we have COFIA up here in Bergen County. We also have New Labor down in, we're in Essex County and Middlesex County. Having that community vigilance to protect workers and stand with workers is one of the most essential things we can do, because unfortunately there are laws against a lot of the things that we're seeing, but they're not strong enough. And the people that unfortunately are supposed to be responsible for taking care of these situations are not vigilant enough, and so we really do depend on community involvement to fight back against these things. And having an organization like New Labor, a community union that's there on the ground, standing up with workers, really can have a positive change. I mean, we've recovered about $240,000 last year in unpaid wages, so I mean, and that's just a drop in the bucket. We got the wage theft ordinance, which has really done some wonderful things in New Brunswick to fight back against wage theft. But really, having those workers involved and standing up does do something. It's important that they have a voice in the situation and that they know how to respond to it, because clearly Amazon doesn't care. These people are just part of a system of efficiency for them. I think this is something that I mentioned when I talked about Walmart last year. I don't think Walmart's bad. I don't think Amazon's bad. I don't think that the people that work there are bad. I don't think they have bad intentions. They just have the interest of corporate profits. And they don't see the people that work for them. They just think, we have to get these numbers, we have to turn these profits, we have to, send out 14,000 orders today, right? They don't think about the people that have to do this and how they break their bodies on the job. This is one thing that worries me a lot. I see the workers that I deal with, and they can enjoy these jobs for several years, but after several years, their bodies are broken, and they don't have pensions to rely on. They don't have a way to continue to make a living. And it's one of the saddest things I've seen, and I have, unfortunately, a number of members that obviously can't collect unemployment benefits, can't collect disability benefits, and are suddenly found after being injured on the job that they can't make it back home, that they can't work here, and they're basically trapped. And these companies don't care. And when they try to say file a workers' comp claim against the company, they'll say, I've never seen this guy. I don't know who he is. And it's just a truly unfortunate situation. One thing I want to say too is I don't see any way to make these jobs a good job. I would love to unionize every Amazon warehouse. I would love to unionize every Walmart warehouse. But they're still not going to be good jobs. They're still not going to be the kind of place we'd want to work at, or we want our kids to work at. It's also up to consumers to stand up and say that we're not going to participate in this. And I think that's an important thing. I know that was part of the discussion that you all have been having. There's two things everyone can do, is stand in solidarity with workers, and then as a consumer, decide not to participate. And I think that's important. I would say not to buy from Amazon. There are other ways. There are independent bookstores. There's a sense that independent bookstores are disappearing. That's not true. Actually, one thing that I can say that Amazon has done good, and this is sort of a bit of a backfire, is it's killed businesses like Borders, and it's actually and Barnes & Noble, and it's actually created the opportunity for the return of local independent bookstores. And I'm not from Bergen County, so I don't know what you have up here, but I know in Princeton we have a great bookstore. I know in New Brunswick we have a great bookstore. I used to work over in Maplewood, we had a great bookstore. There's plenty of great bookstores you can go to. You don't have to buy something from Amazon. And there's also always the public library, which is an amazing resource in so many ways. I don't think people tend to think about how wonderful their local library can be. You don't need to get your book right away, or I guess you can, like I said, you can get your lettuce from Amazon now. What we need to all understand is that there's a trade-off, and there's a human trade-off. There's a human trade-off when we can just click that button and think it's going to arrive at our door. We'll get the extra little button so we can get it in tomorrow or 2 days. Well, there's someone who has to fill that order. There's someone who has to run around that facility. I don't know if some of you read the exposés about people who've gone in and spent a week working in an Amazon facility. Nonetheless, think about people who spend their lives working in these Amazon facilities. There's a human cost to this. Every time you save on time, someone else suffers the consequence for this. And that's something we need to think about. And so thinking about it is how we can care for the community, our communities, and understand that we need to be in solidarity with these workers, that we can't just let this continue to happen. We can make the decision not to put Amazon on our own website, but there's also an important element that we need to be in solidarity with workers that would have to suffer in these facilities. And there's many ways to do that. It doesn't have to be going to a protest. It doesn't have to be filing away stuff. There's many ways we can think. We all have, I'm sure, numerous skills here that you can think of. How can we stand in solidarity with low-wage workers or the immigrant community and improve the situation here? Number one is just noticing that they're there. Too often, we go to the pizza shop, we don't think about the guy who's making the pizza in the back. Too often we go to Stop and Shop, we don't think about the stock boy there. Getting to know the people around us, getting to know people in our community, seeing what their concerns are, and seeing what we have in common with them and how we can build together. I think that's one of the principles behind New Labor. When I organize with New Labor, I'm obviously dealing with people who come from a very different background than myself. But one thing that surprises me always is how much I have in common with the people I work with. I mean, it's funny seeing a video of Margarita. Margarita is one of my best friends. I know her really well. We hang out, Finding those ways to build connections is just as important as saying we're not going to buy from this, but we're going to stand with these workers and recognize the people in our community. And also, it doesn't have to be only Amazon. There's a labor pool of low-wage immigrant workers. They're cleaning our houses, they're cleaning our offices, they're stocking our grocery stores, they're doing the landscaping on our lawns, they're working in these warehouses. These people actually all come from the same labor pool. I know lots of guys that will stand out there and try to get a landscaping job, and if they don't get the landscaping job, they'll call their friend at the agency to see if there's a job for them that day. This is the same labor pool. If you can find ways to help them out, whether it's teaching them English, or standing up for their rights, helping them unionize their workplace, whatever it is, you're helping the conditions for immigrant workers. So there's a lot of ways to do it. There's also the policy end, which I've been working a lot on. The wage theft ordinance that we passed in New Brunswick. We're fighting for a state law against wage theft, which would be really wonderful. Loretta Weinberg is championing that, so we hope we can get that through. There's also earned sick days, which is also another one that's coming up. I don't know if people have seen that in the news lately. There's the battle for earned sick days, getting people just a few sick days every year. What happens when you're working in these agencies, if you get sick, you lose your job. Your kid gets sick, you lose your job. You gotta start again, find a new job, reapply. So having the standards that we've always traditionally associated with a good union job, and making sure that every worker in the state, regardless of their immigration status, regardless of anything, regardless of their race, has those rights is the best thing we can do to, I think, ensure that we have a fair and even society.